KEET-TV and the League of Women Voters of Humboldt County present a forum for candidates running for the office of District Attorney of Humboldt County. Viewers may submit questions during this forum by calling 707-445-0811. This forum is also being streamed live at our KEET.org website. And now your moderator from the League of Women Voters, Bird Lochte.
Good evening. I'm Bird Lochte with the League of Women Voters of Humboldt County. I'd like to welcome all our viewers tonight for a live candidates forum with the 3 candidates for the office of District Attorney. Candidates with us this evening are Michael Acosta, Adrian Kamada, and Stacy Eads. The League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League never endorses candidates or political parties. We do take positions on issues after extensive study and member consensus. The League is dedicated to providing impartial information about voting and the political process. Before we begin our forum tonight, I'd like to share something with our candidates and the viewing audience. 32 years ago, it was suggested to the League Board that we have television candidate forums. Board President Judy Bennett met with St. Clair Adams, Executive Director of KEET at the time, and he agreed, and so began our partnership with KEET on candidate forums. A few years later, Carol Masterson, also a League Board member, took over the job of facilitating these events with KEET. This past January, we lost Carol to leukemia. So I want to take this moment to express our gratitude for all she did to make these forums a success. We now have a committee doing what Carol did by herself for over 25 years. Thank you, Carol, and thank you, KEET. League members are serving tonight as phone volunteers, question sorters, timekeeper, and courier. Since our program tonight will include the use of questions called in from viewers, I encourage you to begin calling in your questions now to 707-445-0811. Our volunteers are waiting to take your calls. The format for tonight's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will be given a maximum of 1 minute to respond to questions previously sent to the League or phoned in by the viewing audience. At the end of the question period, each candidate will have the opportunity to make a 2-minute closing statement. The candidates have drawn lots to determine the order of closing statements. The District Attorney is the public prosecutor of the county, with authority extending throughout Humboldt County in initiating and conducting the prosecution of public offenses that occur within the county on behalf of the people of the state of California. He or she assists and advises the grand jury on criminal matters, oversees a victim witness and child services team, offers support services to victims, their families, and witnesses during criminal proceedings, and collaborates with other agencies to operate special programs focusing on child abuse and on anti-drug abuse enforcement. The basic salary range is $185,120 to $209,435. Remember, call 707-445-0811 with your questions for the candidates. For our first question, we will begin with Michael Acosta. And the first question is, why do you think you should be the next DA?
Well, Bird, I think that there needs to be reform in the District Attorney's Office, transparency, equal justice, and reform. And I think that property crimes have been made a lower priority than they should be. I think our communities are suffering from thieves who go unprosecuted because their cases are traded off for more lucrative revenue opportunities in the controlled substance cases. I think that unregistered sex offenders have also not been made a priority. And I think that I will straighten out the priorities of the District Attorney's Office in the next administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy Eads, your answer, please.
Thank you. I should be the next district attorney because I am the only qualified candidate to be an effective district attorney for Humboldt County. I currently serve as the assistant district attorney, and in that ability, I assist in the overall management and running of the office. I deal with personnel issues as well as scheduling and handling administrative duties such as budget and management of the office. Furthermore, I am currently the lead prosecutor on the Child Abuse and Sexual Assault Crimes Unit. I have over 20 years of experience prosecuting crime. I've handled nearly every type of case in Humboldt County. I have a very successful trial record. I bring justice for victims. I treat victims with compassion and I treat them with respect. I will continue to serve Humboldt County with the integrity, the ethics, and the ability that I have done from the beginning of my career here in Humboldt County, where I was born and raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian Kamada, your answer, please.
Thank you. We have a skyrocketing crime over the last 6 years. We need to look at new ways of addressing it. The old ways are not working. So what I am proposing is adapting and putting in gap stops through leadership. Leadership that I have proven over time. As the head of the Environmental Crime Task Force, I brought together numerous agencies so we could work together to find solutions. And we did that. And I was proud to be named Prosecutor of the Year for the state of California. I'm also the only person here that's been a prosecutor and a public defender. So I've seen both sides of the criminal justice system, which I think gives me the ability to have an effective message that will result in finishing the job.
Thank you. We will stay with you, Adrian, for the next question. Please state your views on citizen oversight of law enforcement and the composition of members of a Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board.
Thank you. I am in favor of having a review board. I think the more transparency that we can have in the criminal justice system, the better. And I think that builds trust with the community. And that is very much what my campaign is about. Building trust through transparency, building trust by having collaborative relationships with very different groups throughout the community. So I think that there should be law enforcement on a committee, that someone that has the experience of being a law enforcement officer, someone that has proven to be successful through their career. A retired officer would be great. I also think that there should be people from public health, and there should be people that are medical doctors, teachers. It should be a diverse cross-section of our community.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
Well, any citizens review board of the law enforcement agencies of our county needs to have teeth. And to have some teeth, it needs to be combined with the grand jury process. I think we should have a more expansive grand jury. I think that all cases of egregious police misconduct and any officer-involved shootings should be brought before the grand jury, and the DA should be in consultation with the grand jury to decide if charges should be brought against officers, rather than having the police department review their own cases through internal affairs. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. I believe that citizen oversight committees for law enforcement is a very valuable resource and tool that we can all benefit from a great deal. The Eureka Police Department, in fact, has their own citizen oversight committee, and it's proven to be very effective and beneficial. And there's currently a little bit of a change that's taking place in terms of the composition. I think in terms of the composition of a citizen oversight committee, that it would be imperative to have representatives of all parts of our county. We live in a very large county geographically, and it's important to ensure that everyone is fully represented. Additionally, I think it would be imperative to have individuals that were from the business community, people that were from the government, people that were homeless, people that were from various economic and socioeconomic backgrounds. Furthermore, to have all genders, races, and identities represented on the Community Oversight Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll stay with you, Stacy. What do you consider being soft on crime, and how do you feel you address that concern?
I consider being soft on crime is doing nothing to address the conduct and the behavior of the offender. So I think it's really important that when we address criminal activity, that we look at the individual circumstances involved in a particular case, the crime that was conducted, as well as the particular offender, and taking into consideration the unique set of circumstances that are presented. So for example, are we dealing with a serious and violent offender, someone who has a history of acting out in a violent manner? Is this a person who hasn't responded previously to attempts to rehabilitate and change their behavior? Is this a person that we need to remove from the streets and protect our community? Alternatively, is it a person who has never offended before and perhaps they're youthful and they would be amenable to treatment and rehabilitation? That might be someone that we would address with, diversion programs or other alternatives to help divert them out of the criminal justice system. So being soft on crime is ignoring our community and not protecting our community.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
Thank you. Being soft on crime means not having a strategy to prioritize the different crimes. When every case is treated like an assembly line, then they're not getting down to what is going to prevent the behavior in the future, what is going to hold the defendant accountable. That's being soft on crime, not having a plan and not having a bigger strategy to do what is necessary to keep our public safe. With a 30% increase in violent crime, we need different ideas, and the way that we do that is by prioritizing cases. And we don't hang on to cases for so long that we end up with a worse resolution down the road. It is about considering the fundamental job of a DA, which is to have a strategy and consider societal's interest as the most paramount thing.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
I think being soft on crime has a lot to do with our overuse of the probation department. I think offenders should serve their sentences mostly up front, should not rely on probation. I would eliminate the use of no opposition to probation plea bargains and also quid pro quo plea bargains, and ensure that every prosecution and case that is worth prosecuting will involve some amount of jail time. If it's a small amount or a large amount, depends on the gravity of the crime. But the overuse of probation is what powers the revolving door that people talk about. Because what happens is, instead of making people front the time they owe society to pay their dues, they end up being violated over and over again for smaller things like not being at the right place at the right time, having a dirty drug test, or not checking in, which aren't even criminal behaviors to begin with. So we need to make people serve their sentences up front.
Thank you. The next question will start with you, Adrian. We had a couple of questions about budgeting and your expertise in hiring, delegating, and budgeting and staffing in the DA's office as part of the job of the DA. Can you talk about your experience in that area, please?
Absolutely. So I don't have any experience in staffing whatsoever. What I do have experience in is leadership. Leadership to make an entire plan come through by recognizing people's strengths and weaknesses and bringing them together, like I did with the Criminal Environmental Task Force. And in terms of budgeting, what I plan to do is have a very strong business manager that actually does the accounting. And using that business manager to do the accounting part, that's a job that I'm not as strong at. I'm not an accountant, but having a good accountant that can help, what I ultimately make the final decisions on how the resources are used, and those resources are used in a way that is going to prioritize my agenda, which is to implement plans that are going to make our community safer because they've been proven to work at other places, and get away from the same old thing.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. So I've had a lot of experience working on the budget, and in particular, in recent past, we were able to address reallocation of funds and resources so that we could pay our support staff a higher level of what they deserve in light of the really high stress, high impact job that they undertake. And the fact of the matter is that without our support staff, we couldn't do the work that we do for the community. So the budget within the district attorney's office is very large. About half of it comes from the general fund. The other half comes primarily from grants and as well as Measures D funding. In terms of personnel issues, I've unfortunately had to deal with a number of personnel issues, and I've even had to address performance issues, conflicts amongst folks within the district attorney's office. And in terms of the leadership that Mr. Kamada has referenced in terms of the environmental task force, I think it's important to note that the environmental task force existed long before Mr. Kamada was a deputy DA. So that is something that I do feel that needs to be pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
Well, at 51 years old, I'm the oldest candidate. I'm also the most experienced overall attorney, having practiced well over 20 years in more than one state and several tribal jurisdictions, federal courts, federal appellate courts, state appellate courts. I've been a managing attorney at Dakota Plains Legal Services in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, an Indian reservation. I've been the executive director of the Bear River Gaming Agency here locally with the staff and budgetary concerns. I've had to do hiring, firing, performance evaluations, and all aspects of human resource management. I think that retention in the DA's office is best served by a more egalitarian income or salary range. And I think the district attorney's salary is too high and should be redistributed. At least half of it I would redistribute to the other deputy DAs in the office in order to promote their retention and to show them that we're all on the same team.
Thank you. We'll stay with you, Michael, for this next question. There have been controversial cases in the past. How would you handle these types of cold cases?
Question is about controversial cases or cold cases. I'm not sure how the two relate necessarily, but controversial cases would be handled as any others. I don't think that the district attorney's office should be doing press releases on controversial cases. I think it poisons the jury pool. We have an ethical duty not to do so. I think that we should keep cases out of the limelight as much as possible. If a case is newsworthy, the independent free press should approach the district attorney's office and ask for comment. It shouldn't be the case that the district attorney's office is proactively putting out press releases and prejudicing the jury pools of controversial cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Your answer, please, Adrian.
In terms of controversial cases, I think it is the role of the district attorney to take the lead and not pass that on to a deputy. The controversial cases need to be shown to have a signal to the community that this is really important. This is what happened during the murder of George Floyd. We saw how the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota sat at council table to symbolize that this is an important case to the people. And I think that's a very important thing. In terms of press releases, as Mr. Acosta was talking about, obviously there shouldn't be any sort of press releases or anything that would in any matter prejudice the defendant ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. Any case should be handled appropriately by following the law. So in assessing a case and evaluating whether it's something that we can proceed on prosecution, we have to assess the admissible evidence and make a determination regarding whether a crime can be proven based upon the admissible evidence. So controversial or not, it doesn't impact the rules and the laws that we must file in order to ethically handle and prosecute cases. We shouldn't make our determinations based upon public sentiment or emotion. I think it's also important to note that since Mr. Kamada's termination from the district attorney's office, we have a team of experienced, qualified, ethical prosecutors, each of whom is very well equipped to handle serious cases, murders, homicides, sexual assaults. I'm very proud of the team that we have, and I have full faith that they will be able to handle the most complex of prosecutions.
Thank you. We're going to stay with you, Stacy, for the next question. What is the case that you have personally handled that had the most impact on you?
It's absolutely impossible for me to make a determination which cases had the most impact on me. I've handled a number of cases that are of the most sensitive of nature. Primarily, my caseload involves homicides as well as sexual assault and child sexual assault and molestation cases. Each of those is very sensitive, involving individuals whose lives have been deeply impacted by the criminal conduct of their offenders. I've had the benefit of working very closely with a number of families and victims and survivors, and I've gotten to see them grow and heal and move through the criminal justice system. It is one of the most rewarding aspects of my job to help support and treat victims and survivors with compassion and the respect that they deserve. Sadly, they don't always get that in our criminal justice system, and that is something that I have been committed to providing from the beginning of my career, and I will provide it throughout as district attorney, and I will expect that of all of my deputies and everyone that appears on behalf of the people.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
I think the case that's affected me the most in practice has been the People versus Nicholas Legal, which was a murder case. My client was charged along with 3 other co-defendants. He was falsely charged. He was guilty by association only. He didn't have any part in the stabbing of a young man. And despite 2 judges who were visiting judges in Humboldt County dismissing the case, the district attorney's office filed that case 3 times against this young man. And anyone that knew Nick knew that he was not the leader of a criminal enterprise like they were alleging. He was a very nice young man, and he is free today because we were able to get that dismissed a 3rd time. But it just highlighted what happens when personal vendettas get involved with prosecutorial decision-making, because after 2 judges had dismissed the case, there's no way that a 3rd bite at the apple should have been given. And Marilyn Miles agreed with that assessment, dismissed the case a 3rd time.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
Yes, so homicides have got, for me, are a situation where you're dealing with family members that are grieving, and you have to carry them through a system that is often cumbersome and difficult and has a lot of rules that they don't understand. So being able to shepherd them through the system is one of the most important duties that a district attorney can have. And I did that in People versus Harrison, the murder of Robert Holtzclaw. Each date, the daughter of Mr. Holtzclaw as well as Mr. Holtzclaw's sister were there. And I made sure to spend a lot of time with them, let them know what was happening at each step. Same thing in the case that I did in the homicide of Jesse Simpson when he was murdered by Eric Lively. Those cases where you have to help people through the system that have lost someone, those are very, very difficult. And so it comes from a position of being empathetic as well as smart about how you handle it.
Thank you. Remember the number to call with your questions, 707-445-0811. For our next question, we will start with you, Michael. What is diversion, and do you support it?
Well, there's several types of diversion. When they say the term diversion, there's statutory deferment of judgment, which is something like PC 1000 that's been on the books and is utilized for first-time drug offenders. There's deferment of prosecution, which is is much less used, and so either of those can be a form of diversion. Diversion is when we do not prosecute the case in exchange for or in favor of some sort of utilitarian betterment of the offender. Diversion is fine. It's offender-centric. I still am a believer firmly in the retributive theory of justice, that if you do the crime, you should do your time. So it's not my first choice. If something's worth prosecuting, people should be doing jail time. If there's no jail time eligible for it, it shouldn't necessarily be prosecuted at all. It's not a social service agency. It's not a 12-step program. It's the prosecutor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Your answer, Stacy?
Thank you. So diversion is essentially where the district attorney actually files charges within the criminal justice system. A case is created, and then if there's a statutory basis for diversion, that might be triggered. For example, mental health diversion, veterans diversion, child abuse diversion programs, as well as diversion programs geared towards drug and substance possession and users. Also in the works, we have the tribal diversion program that we're working on developing a memorandum of understanding with the Yurok tribe, as well as we're hoping that we can incorporate other tribes into that once there's a legal agreement that is acceptable from the court's perspective. So with diversion, rather than going through to the point of being convicted, an offender can have the opportunity to receive treatment and services to change their behavior and ideally not have a conviction that lands on their record. So it's a great opportunity for offenders, and it's a great opportunity for everyone.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
So Mr. Acosta and Ms. Eads both talked about the statutory diversions. And yes, there are those statutory diversions that exist. There's also a way as a district attorney of doing diversions before filing. You can also do diversions after filing by using their discretion. Pre-filing diversions, they should have an agreement. There should have a victim. If a victim is involved, that victim should have to agree to the diversion. But a pre-filing diversion can be very effective. I plan to implement a community-based one where we look at elements of restorative justice for low-level and misdemeanor crimes, again, trying to steer people out of the criminal justice system. Those will also be very consistent with the tribal court diversions, where they can have culturally appropriate programs and resources that they can, again, try to keep people from having convictions, which often perpetuates crime once you're in the system.
Thank you. We'll stay with you, Adrian, for the next question. What is your approach to addressing repeat offenders?
So with repeat offenders, one of the main things is that we're going to have a very specific agreement with the courts, with the judges. This is one that can't be handled in a way that is pre-filing like I was discussing before. We're going to have to figure out a plan that it comes with an agreement also with the public defender's office. It has to be all the criminal justice partners coming together to figure this out. What I would propose is that when somebody has committed a theft or vandalism multiple times within a year, once we get to 3 offenses within a single year, that there be time that is actually asserted into the jail. So they're actually spending time in jail if they cannot find exit ramps like through treatment or elsewhere. There needs to be actual punishment. There needs to be jail time.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
I think it's really simple. We eliminate probation entirely. The legislature has already started this process last year with the passage of AB 1950, which lowered felony probation terms from 5 to 3 years and misdemeanor probation terms from 3 to 1 year. I think that's a step in the right direction, but it didn't go far enough. I think the district attorney's office has a lot of discretion in settling cases. The 90% of cases which are settled by plea bargains, in those, none of them should involve probation if the DA has any say about it. They should involve jail time up front if the case is worth prosecuting. If it's really something we should be prosecuting, let's give some jail time up front, not rely on probation, because probation is the gateway to the revolving door.
Thank you. Your answer, Stacy, please.
Thank you. So repeat offenders are exactly what it sounds like. And one of the things that we at the District Attorney's Office, DA Fleming and myself, have proposed in collaboration with the Sheriff Hansel, is a chronic offender program where those offenders that we identify that are low-level offenders, so they're committing misdemeanor offenses, but they're doing so repeatedly while out on the streets, and there's minimal accountability for the commission of their crimes by the courts. So for those identified chronic offenders, what we're asking the courts to do is to impose significant jail time. We know who the offenders are. We know who are repeatedly committing the rampant theft throughout our community, targeting our businesses and our community members. And we think those folks need to sit some time in jail.
Thank you. Please remember, call in your questions, 707-445-0811. We'll start with you, Stacy, with this next question. Please share the organizations that are supporting your candidacy.
I am supported by the labor unions, 2 separate labor unions. I'm also supported by a number of individuals that work for the district attorney's office. And why that is so significant and important to me is that those are the people that see me on the daily basis. They work with me, they know my demeanor, they know how I handle people in the work environment, and they know how I handle my cases. They know I work hard, they know that I'm ethical. So having the support of all of the lead experienced prosecutors, as well as the vast majority of our support staff, our chief DA investigator, her senior DA investigator, Sheriff Billy Hansel, retired Sheriff Mike Downey, as well as retired Detective Ron Harpum. Those are some very valuable endorsements that I have, as well as members throughout the community, people from all spectrums of the political view. This is a nonpartisan race, and I think it's very important that everyone is fully represented by the DA.
Thank you. Your answer, Adrian?
Well, I agree with Ms. Eads that this is obviously a nonpartisan job, and that we should have we're going to be doing the job for everybody. And so having broad support is important. I am supported by and endorsed by the Yurok Tribe, the Democrat Central Committee, the Progressive Democrats, the Green Party, also some of the most conservative leaders in our community as well. Environmental groups, their coalition has also endorsed me. The Central Labor Council of Humboldt and Del Norte County has endorsed me. ASME, the union group for all of the county workers, has also endorsed me. I'm also proud to have endorsements from within the district attorney's office, including majority, I believe, of the investigators, as well as deputy DAs, and lots of law enforcement officers. I have more law enforcement support than my 2 opponents combined.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
Well, I think my base of support comes from the poor, the disenfranchised, and the downtrodden of Humboldt County, and certainly anyone who's been subjected to the criminal justice system of Humboldt County, whether they were guilty or not. Maybe particularly those who were not guilty, who had to suffer the system and the stigma of the system when they were falsely accused. I also have support from individual tribal leaders that I've come into contact with: Eileen Meyer of the Bear River Tribe, Richard Haberman, the first chairman of the Yurok Tribe. But I really think that this, my base of support would be anyone who believes that the system is broken and that priorities need to be changed so that money is conservatively spent on putting violent criminals and property criminals in jail. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll stay with Adrian for the next question. It's about drug offenders. What will be your approach to drug offenders? Particularly, how would you deal with low-level drug offenders?
So we're talking about low-level drug offenders. PC 1000, which Mr. Acosta had mentioned earlier, is a statutory diversion that's mandatory that the district attorney's office, when charging a simple possession of drugs, tell at the time of arraignment, the first step of the criminal proceedings, tell that defendant if they're eligible for PC 1000. PC 1000 essentially diverts the person from the program, and they have to do some education and as well as get an assessment. If they successfully complete those things, then their case is dismissed. I do think that there is a number of low-level street dealers that I think that are supporting their habit that would benefit from a similar type of diversion program that is more strenuous. But we really need to try to get as many people out of the system as possible, and I think those programs do that.
Thank you. Your answer, Stacy?
So PC 1000, the diversion program for possession of narcotics is simply what happens now in court, and I don't see any reason why we would change that. So it certainly gives offenders the opportunity to engage in rehabilitation and treatment to address their substance use, and to have the opportunity to not have a criminal record based upon their simple possession. So I think it's a successful program, and I don't see a reason why we would change that. I think it's different when we're talking about dealers of narcotics, and as well as when we're talking about dealers in particular that are dealing fentanyl. As we all know, the overdose rate for fentanyl is extremely high. It's very dangerous, and it's plaguing our community and killing members of our community. And so I think that's an issue that we really need to address head on.
Thank you. Your answer, Michael?
Well, once we start talking about rehabilitation and diversion and all of these other things, we're really not talking about prosecutorial functions. We're turning the prosecutor's office into a social service agency. I think if cases are worth prosecuting, they should be worthy of jail time. And I don't think low-level offenders should receive jail time. I think that a policy of confiscation of the drugs straight off the street accomplishes the goal of removing the drugs from the street, and at the same time is the cheapest alternative, because once you talk about prosecution, you're talking about many tax dollars. Once you talk about putting a low-level offender of drug laws into jail, you're talking $106,000 a year that we pay for inmates' housing. Do we want to spend any of that, of those beds and the cost of those beds on low-level drug offenders? This addiction disorder is a medical issue. Let's put it back where it belongs, in the medical industry, and keep the prosecutor's office reserved for prosecuting cases which deserve jail time.
Thank you. Michael, the next question. Our community is hard hit by ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. How do you think you can address that as the DA?
That's an interesting question. I think that certainly taking into account, first of all, the victims' ACEs is important, so that we are sensitive to those issues and give them a voice in the courts. That's the first job of the district attorney's office. With respect to offenders, I think that there is some room for adjustment or deviation from what should be standardized jail sentences for people who get prosecuted. And that deviation should be, if they do have documented child trauma, that there should be some consideration of that in sentencing. But it should also be standardized. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
I think when we come to this issue, we really need, this is a critical issue in our community. We have far too many children in our community that are falling through the cracks. I think that when we talk about ACEs, we should be thinking about solutions that are addressing things like trauma, addressing things like economic opportunities, and stress. So therapy, education, health needs, that is where we need to be focused when it comes to this, because it gives us an opportunity, again, to have an opportunity to get rid of this generational cycle of families that engage in criminal behavior, criminal conduct. So let's do everything we can with therapy and education.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. ACEs is a tremendous problem here in Humboldt County. So for ACEs, it can be all sorts of circumstances, from violence in the home, the lack of stability, a caregiver who abuses substances, the absence of a parent, the absence of a caregiver, being subjected to violence, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect. The result of ACEs for folks that have higher numbers of ACE experiences can be ultimately education insecurity, housing insecurity, but chronic illness, substance abuse, lifelong challenges. But with intervention, like we do with the Child Abuse Services team, removing the violence from the home, providing security, providing emergency shelter, providing emergency services and food and transitional housing and security for a child, we can have a direct impact on a child who may be suffering from ACEs exposure.
Thank you. We'll begin with you, Stacy, with this question. What would you do to prevent white supremacist violence in our community?
Any incident of white supremacist violence that comes across my desk that's investigated and reported would absolutely be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I would handle that as a hate crime, and there would be absolutely no forgiveness for those types of crimes. So I would handle those types of matters by serious, full prosecution based upon the evidence that was admissible before court, as well as what the particular types of violence and acts we could prove and what the particular crimes were. But there's no room for that type of hatred.
Violent crimes, all violent crimes, to the fullest extent of law. With hate crimes, there are enhancements that can be applied. I think it's important to look out for, in the area of white supremacy, crimes that are not only committed against people of color, but can be committed against people of different sexual orientations and against white people who are supporters of people of color. We need to be looking out for those cases proactively to make sure that we're not missing any hate crimes and to be able to be ensuring that we're applying those enhancements where they're appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
I agree with both of my opponents here. This has to be, obviously, whatever the underlying offense is, there needs to be the enhancements for hate crimes. Those can be difficult to prove. So I think one thing that I would do is train law enforcement about the elements of hate crimes and go over the legal standards that we must prove. And I think that is one thing that there's a little bit of a gap right now, is that we really need to paint a bigger picture of that person's history and look at the specific facts that can help us prove that the crime that was committed was based on a desire to hate based on someone's either ethnicity, their race, or religion, or gender identity.
Thank you. This will be our last question, and we begin with Michael. What are the most important challenges facing the prosecutor's office?
The most important challenges of the prosecutor's office are priorities. Priorities are screwed up. We have the most incarcerated country in the world. We have the world record for incarceration, put that another way. We have 4 times the incarceration of Russia at this point. We have more incarcerated people than China, and they have a population that's 4 times our size. Reconciling that with the fact that we're not in the top 10 of the safest countries in the world is the major job of the prosecutor's office. If we are the most incarcerated country in the world, we should be the safest country in the world also, and we're not. And that has a lot to do with our priorities. It has a lot to do with transparency. It has a lot to do with too many resources going towards nonviolent crimes and not being focused on violent crimes, making our communities safer, and property crimes, which really lower the quality of life for all of us in Humboldt County, and which are often traded off for more lucrative revenue opportunities of drug cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. The priority of the District Attorney's Office is to enforce the laws to ensure public safety. In doing that function, the District Attorney, in large part, the duties and obligations are outlined and dictated by the law. So we enforce the law based upon the law. And we must do so with integrity, with ethics, and applying good reasoned logic and experience based upon handling of cases, working with families, working with victims, hearing, listening, gaining input, gaining insight. So it's very important that as the district attorney that we hear from our community and prioritize and enforce the laws of our community to ensure that our public is safe. Humboldt County is our home. We need to feel safe and protected here in our home.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think that one of the key things is prioritizing cases. having a strategy to do that. With the skyrocketing crime, we cannot continue with the old ways of doing things. We need to adapt programs that will cut off people from continuing into the system, being in that revolving door. That is where it has to be key, and that where we need to focus those efforts is in young adults and children. We really need to put all of our resources there to get those folks out of the system. It's going to have a long-term effect. I think that is what is essential to looking at a long-term impact on reducing crime, and having a strategy to prioritize so prosecutors aren't sitting around waiting to do low-level felonies all day when they have murders, rapes, sex assault towards children cases. There really needs to be a strategy, a clear strategy.
Thank you. Now we will hear closing statements from each candidate. We had questions that we didn't have time for. Questions involving cash bail, reducing costs in the DA's office, racism, law enforcement fatal use of force in the local police, and child offenders being tried in adult court. Candidates, you may wish to address these topics in your closing statements. We'll now hear a closing statement from Michael Acosta.
Thank you. Well, I am a reformist candidate that is not like the other reformist candidates you've seen nationally. I am not a decarceral reformist candidate. I believe that it's not about having less people in jail. It's about putting the right people in jail. We do need to reconcile the fact that we are the most incarcerated country in the world. We're not the safest, but there are plenty of crimes in Humboldt County and plenty of people that should be subjected to incarceration who are committing egregious crimes against persons and property. Unfortunately, many of them go unpunished because of trading that goes on behind the scenes. This is information the public never has because there's no transparency in these areas. But there is significant trading, commerce going on between the DA's office, law enforcement, and criminals who can provide information for more lucrative revenue opportunities of forfeiture-eligible cases. And I think that that needs to be addressed. The reality is, I'm here to tell you that until that's addressed, the public will never understand why we have rising crime and so many people in jail. And that is one of the key factors, is transparency of the government. The federal government does produce statistics on how many criminals they work with and how many authorized crimes that they authorize, called otherwise illegal activity. The local government does no such thing. The public has no idea how many criminals are on the payroll of this local government. And until that is exposed, you will never understand why crime is going up. And we have so many people in jail, but we don't feel any safer. So a vote for me would be a vote for transparency and straightening out the priorities. People who do the crime will do their time regardless of who they are or who they tell on. And if it's not worth putting someone in jail, we're not going to prosecute it. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy Eads, your closing statement now, please.
As Assistant District Attorney, I'm the only candidate who has over 20 years of experience prosecuting crime. I am the only candidate who has an untarnished record of serving ethically with integrity. I have the support and the recognition of a well-established reputation of serving and appearing, being professional, working compassionately with the courts, working compassionately with the victims I serve. I will continue to serve compassionately, seeking justice with respect. I have administrative and management experience as well. I'm committed to serving with integrity. I'm the only candidate who has ever prosecuted a law enforcement officer. Nobody is above the law. I will uphold the law, I will enforce the law, and I will do that to ensure that Humboldt County is a safe place. Since Mr. Kamada's termination from the District Attorney's Office, we have a good group of experienced prosecutors who are able to obtain convictions. Mr. Kamada's conviction record is deplorable. When he was working as a deputy DA, he had a 33% conviction rate. That means nearly 70% of his cases resulted in acquittals. He wants to talk about transparency. He doesn't share that information. He wants to take over the lead cases, the big cases, as the prosecutor. He doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the ability to successfully try serious cases. This is dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. If Mr. Kamada is your district attorney, you will not be safe. As your district attorney, I am committed to continue to serve with integrity, upholding the law, following the law.
Thank you. Your closing statement, Adrian Kamada.
Thank you, and thanks for holding this event and giving us an opportunity to speak to the public about this important decision. First, I'll just address a couple of things really quick that you had raised on the questions about things that weren't addressed. For juvenile cases, I think we should treat children like children. Most children, or most people's brains don't develop until they're 25. There's very limited circumstances where I think we should move in juveniles into adult court, if ever. In terms of racism, I think that we have a very big problem here, and we need to use the tribal courts as much as possible. About 6% of our population is Native American, and about almost 25 to 26% of the people in the jail at any given time are Native American. So we have a big problem there. So we need to use those tribal courts. I'm asking for your vote because we need change. We have skyrocketing crime all around us, and Ms. Eads wants to put her head in the sand, pretend that doesn't exist, and continue with the old ways of doing things, and is basically hoping that her attacks on me with numbers that are not true. 33% is not a true number. I am the only out of her and me, I'm the only person that's done homicide cases, homicide jury trials, and I've won all the ones that I've done. So that is a misrepresentation, and I think it's very interesting that she spent most of her time this evening attacking me rather than giving the folks what she'll do as a DA. We need change, we need it now, and I'm going to be decisive, accountable, and I'm accountable to the people, and I am going to make sure that our system is more equitable, more effective, and more efficient. Please vote for change, please vote for me, and I will prove to you folks that it is the best decision to make.
Thank you. This concludes tonight's program. I'd like to thank KEET-TV for airing this forum to help voters be better informed about their voting choices. Membership in the League of Women Voters is open to all women and men 16 years and older. If you would like more information about the League, please call 707-444-9252 or go to our website at lwvhc.org. Our website includes a complete schedule of upcoming candidate forums as well as additional information about our League. KEET-TV will be airing candidate forums on Mondays and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. The next forum is Monday, May 23rd for Recorder County Clerk Registrar of Voters. Following that, on Wednesday, May 25th, Arcata City Council. And in conclusion, on Wednesday, June 1st, the Superior Court Judge. I'd like to urge all of our viewers to consider contributing to KEET-TV. It is through viewer memberships and contributions that KEET-TV can continue to present these programs, which are so important to our community. I'd like to thank those of you who took the time to email or phone in your questions. We have all gotten a clearer picture of the issues in our community because of your questions. And finally, I'd like to thank the candidates themselves for taking the time from their very hectic schedules to answer the questions of the voters. Thank you also for having the dedication to democracy to run for this important office. Thank you all for watching, and please return your vote by mail ballot through the U.S. mail, into a secure drop box, or any polling place, or vote at your precinct on June 7th. Power is in your vote. Good night. Thank you.